He won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, coronated Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has appointed his first cabinet, and amidst a bloodbath of Truss-side ministers, there was small cause for optimism, including Superwoman Suella Braverman's shock but welcome return as Home Secretary. So, will Rishi have what it takes to unify the warring Conservative Party after all? Well, using his first speech outside number 10 to slam his predecessor certainly wasn't the best start.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss, but some mistakes were made. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level.
I'll tackle the shock return of that snake Michael Gove to cabinet in my digest next. Then I'll get the views of my superstar panel. Tonight, I'm joined by top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, football legend and social commentator Matt Letizia, and the journalist and author Rebecca Reid. As always, your views matter most, though. So tonight, I want to know, are you happy with Rishi's new cabinet, and especially the return of Gove? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, to help you make up your mind. I've reconvened my political masterminds. Tory grandee David Mallor, Conservative commentator Albion Ancona, broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and political commentators Emily Hewitson and Suzanne Evans. They'll do battle in the clash tonight at 9:20. After the Conservative establishment's great stitch-up denied Boris a reserved place on the ballot, how can the Tory party now unite behind its new leader? Well, former Culture Secretary and Boris supporter John Whittingdale makes the case for harmony at 10:15. Well, Boris certainly buried the hatchet by voicing his support for Rishi today, but does that mean he's given up on an extraordinary return to PM? His biographer and longtime friend Andrew Jimson reveals all on the likelihood of a Bojo comeback in The Outsider at 9:50. Braverman's return to the Home Office is terrible news for the Guardian reading tofu eating Rokawati, but great news in our battle to stop the small boats invading Britain. Nigel Farage joins me live to explain why her reappointment is so crucial to solving the migrant crisis. He's live with me at 9:40. Liz Truss defiantly defended her bold approach to the top job today.
I'm more convinced than ever that we need to be bold and confront the challenges that we face. We simply cannot afford to be a low-growth country.
So does she have any future as a low-tax campaigner? That's our big debate after 10. Lefty broadcaster Channel 4 sparked outrage after airing this X-rated performance by a trans singer at the weekend. But as new NHS guidance states, most children identifying as trans are simply going through a, quote, transient phase. Has the tide turned in the fight to safeguard children against trans extremism? And does it vindicate those who risked everything by speaking out? Well, tonight, social commentator Leah Halpin is uncancelled on that at 10:40. As LGBT campaigner Peter Tatchell is arrested for staging a heroic protest in Qatar just a month before the World Cup kicks off. Should England and Wales boycott the tournament? Plus, Aston, James Corden buckles to social media warriors and issues this grovelling apology for his restaurant rant.
I've been walking around thinking that I hadn't done anything wrong, right? But the truth is, like I have, I made a rude comment.
Meanwhile, Duchess Difficult finally appears to admit she is a diva.
I'm particular. I think a high tide raises all ships, right? Yeah. Stop whispering and tiptoeing around it. Just say what it is that you need. You're allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to be clear. It does not make you demanding. It does not make you difficult.
Sure it doesn't. More on Corden and Markle in the Media Buzz at 10:30. And as ever, I'll crown tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Lefties keep telling us it's the UK that is somehow a laughingstock on the international stage. Well, if that's the case, how do they feel about the fact the so-called leader of the free world was unable to pronounce the name of our new PM in another catastrophically embarrassing public appearance?
And whether it's the United Kingdom or just today, we've got news that Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. As my brother would say, go figure. And the Conservative Party expected to become the Prime Minister, I think, tomorrow when he goes to see the King. Pretty astounding. A groundbreaking milestone, and it matters. It matters. Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister.
I mean, what can you say anymore? My verdict on the Sunak cabinet and the return of that snake Michael Gove and the superwoman Suella Braverman coming up in just a moment. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Top Daily Mail columnist, former Tory advisor to Amanda Plattel, former England footballer Matt Letizia, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. But before all of that, the latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been busy appointing his new cabinet today. Jeremy Hunt is staying on as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Still not clear yet, though, whether he's going to be publishing his new fiscal plan next Monday. Other key appointments include Dominic Raab, who's returning as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, and James Cleverly remains at the Foreign Office as Foreign Secretary. Ben Wallace, incidentally, retains Defence, and Suella Braverman, again, Home Secretary, less than a week after she resigned over a breach of the Ministerial Code. Grant Shapps is Business Secretary, and Penny Mordaunt was the last of the afternoon, remaining as Leader of the House of Commons. The appointments went on into the evening, including Kemi Badenoch, who returns as International Trade Secretary, and Michael Gove, who returns as Levelling Up Secretary after being sacked by Boris Johnson in July. Well, earlier, speaking for the first time as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's government after meeting King Charles at Buckingham Palace. He pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government, but warned the country should brace itself for difficult decisions ahead. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has said the Tories have crashed the economy with low wages, high prices and a cost of living crisis.
I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are.
Well, let's not forget to mention the former Prime Minister who bid farewell to number 10 Downing Street today, saying brighter days lie ahead. In her final speech from Downing Street, Liz Truss praised her government, saying they'd acted urgently and decisively as she spoke of cutting taxes. She also urged her replacement, Mr Sunak, to be bold. Well, in other news today, 6 men suspected of being part of a people smuggling gang involved in illegal channel crossings have been arrested in France. Several boats, as well as over 100 life jackets, have been seized from garages in northern France. The group's accused of storing boats, which would have been used by migrants to travel across the English Channel to get to the UK. This comes as 2 residents in Dover told GBNews this evening they found a teenage migrant in one of their bedrooms after 30 migrants went missing last week. New figures out today show the price of low-cost groceries like pasta, tea and cooking oil have all soared. The Office for National Statistics says budget items have increased by about 17% over the last 12 months. That comes as inflation returned to a 40-year high, with prices up 10.1% in a year. Food prices were the biggest driver of higher living costs last month. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time to get back to Dan Wootton tonight.
In his first speech as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak pledged today outside Downing Street that he would form a cabinet to reward talent over petty internal politics.
So I stand here before you, ready to lead our country into the future, to put your needs above politics, to reach out and build a government that represents the very best traditions of my party. Together, we can achieve incredible things.
To begin with, however, it looked like he was largely promoting the loyalists, backstabbers, destabilisers and Ramona globalists who first forced Boris Johnson out and then managed to depose Liz Truss in just 6 brutal weeks. Out go the likes of Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg, Justice Secretary Brandon Lewis, Education Secretary Kit Malthouse and Levelling Up Secretary Simon Clarke. Their only crime are supporting the last 2 Prime Ministers. In come key wets like Dominic Raab as Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Mal Stride as Work and Pension Secretary. And Michael Gove, who is inexplicably awarded for plotting and scheming against 2 Prime Ministers in a row. Is that really how we want our politics to play out? If you behave badly enough, you're kept around the cabinet table because you're just too dangerous on the back benches? And what about Jeremy Hunt, the most powerful person in government and a key plank in the Ramona globalist coup against Truss, who stays as Chancellor because he's now seemingly more important than the PM? He's not popular amongst Tories. He was thrashed in 2 leadership elections, remember. He's pro-China. He's zero COVID advocate, and he argued for a second EU referendum. So how and why is this man there? But despite that criticism, there were things to like about this cabinet too, like Kemi Badenoch taking on the Women's and Equalities brief alongside international trade, just like Liz Truss once did. And most significant was the return of Superwoman Suella Braverman back to the Home Office. The Home Secretary's decision to back Sunak over Boris Johnson over the weekend could be seen as the final nail in the coffin, actually, for the former PM's comeback chances. And she is now the unquestionable star of the right of the Tories, and her success, or failure, if the blob said about trying to bring her down, well, that may well determine if the Conservative Party has even a scintilla of hope of winning the next election. If Sunak wants to prove he is prepared to spurn a globalist or even socialist agenda, as Rees-Mogg might describe it, he has to back his new Home Secretary. He has to back her to stop the boats and end the illegal invasion of Britain via the Channel. He has to back her to challenge the ECHR. He has to back her to win the war on our woke police forces, more interested in halting free speech than keeping our streets safe. And he has to back her to stop the scourge of lawless Britain. Of course, the moment Braverman returned, the MSM and the political establishment predictably erupted, like former Minister and arch-Tory agitator David Gork, who even tweeted, "I'm starting to miss Liz Truss," which just proves to me how pathetic the Ramona mob are and why they should be ignored, not appeased. They want everyone who thinks like them to deliver on the same World Economic Forum-inspired agenda. So, as you know, I am highly sceptical about a Sunak premiership and deeply concerned that the Conservative Party is facing near terminal decline after abandoning democracy and turning on its loyal members. Sunak should also be very careful about trampling on the legacy of Boris Johnson. When he resigned earlier this year as Chancellor, Sunak wrote to his ex-boss, "I have respected the powerful mandate given to you by the British people in 2019. But today, outside Downing Street, he'd changed his tune, saying this:
I will always be grateful to Boris Johnson for his incredible achievements as Prime Minister, and I treasure his warmth and generosity of spirit. And I know he would agree that the mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual. It is a mandate that belongs to and unites all of us."
Perhaps most worrying of all today, though, was the sacking of the Tory party chairman and Red Wall champion Jake Berry, who just days ago had warned, if we believe in democracy, members cannot be denied a say on who the next leader of the party is. Well, that's happened. It was an anti-democratic disgrace. So Sunak has to do much more to regain the faith of the party, who still view him as a billionaire backstabber parachuted in as Prime Minister without securing one vote. To respond now, my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platell, former England football legend Matt Le Tissier, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Amanda Platell, you used to be an advisor to the Tories when they were under William Hague. What do you make of this mess?
I'm wearing black because I despair. I don't think I'll get out of black ever again.
You're going to be the new Queen Victoria, mourning for your party till your death.
It is completely and utterly depressing. Look, there's an argument that we have to get behind Rishi. What did the president call him?
What was it?
Sudiaki or something. I'm going to get behind Sudiaki.
That was my only laugh of the day.
I love that. We have to, because that's the only hope. If we go to the elections anytime soon, probably half the party will be wiped out. And I can tell you that there are many, many Conservatives, and I include myself in that group, that think that's what really has to happen.
So what, you have to unite behind Sunak?
No, that it's not going to happen. You know,
because you have to accept defeat.
You have to accept that they've been in power for 13 years. There's a 13-year cycle in politics in Britain. Margaret Thatcher and Major had 13 between them. Tony Blair and Brown had 13. We've had 13. The party is in utter disarray. And quite frankly, I wouldn't feel sorry for many of them losing their seats. I really wouldn't. And as for this new cabinet of his, 25, by the time I came on set tonight, 25, only 4 or 5 new faces, all the rest are retreads. There are only 5 women out of 25 cabinet ministers, and there's only 1 woman, Suella Braverman, in one of the 4 great offices of state. How is that moving on? How is that modern? How is that uniting? How is that inclusive? And I just watch him and I just think, he's like an android. There's just something. I thought Liz Truss was wooden, but, he's plywood. He's not even wooden all the way through.
No, indeed. And I mean, Matt Le Tissier, during the campaign earlier this summer, I did often used to refer to Rishi Sunak as being robotic, and he has proved that the last couple of days. I think what worries me most, though, is his globalist influences, because, Jeremy Hunt, how did he end up as Chancellor? And now he is the man who cannot be moved. And this is a guy who has a lot of worrying views.
Yeah, I'm afraid he does have a lot of worrying views. And I think the worrying thing for me is that a lot of people actually don't know about that.
I think he's moderate.
They do indeed, and I think it's a big worry for the country. I think I would have liked to have seen today from Rishi Sunak when he did his speech. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of contrition from him, that actually some of the decisions that he took while he was Chancellor of the Exchequer are actually the reasons why we're in the problem. We've got the problems that we've got today.
Because he referred to COVID, didn't he?
He did refer to
without
COVID.
actually making the point that it was him who had this scheme that lasted for far too long.
£37 billion on a track and trace that was pointless, quite frankly. Printing money left, right and centre for the furlough bribery scheme to keep people quiet while they had lockdowns, which proved completely ineffectual. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit of that. And the most alarming thing for me is that he couldn't win a contest against Liz Truss, who he's just gone there and criticised for making all these mistakes. Who Liz Truss is useless, but oh, by the way, I couldn't even beat her a few weeks ago. Now without any kind of vote, I'm in as Prime Minister.
And Rebecca Reed, this idea that has been peddled now, and actually everyone seems to have agreed with it, that, Liz Truss was the woman who entirely tanked the economy. No, Matt's completely right. It was all of the decisions made during 2 years of largely unnecessary COVID lockdowns that trashed and tanked the economy.
I mean, lots of things have tanked the economy. It's not just that.
Was the main factor.
But yeah, well, it's also the cost of living crisis, which is at least partially caused by the fuel crisis, because everything's more expensive, because it costs more money to make everything. So there's a lot of reasons why the economy is not doing terribly well. But I'm not going to lie to you, I'm feeling pretty upbeat today.
Of course you are.
Quite like Rishi.
You are. You know, the left are delighted by this.
It's fun, because you have to stop calling him Fishy Rishi, which is a fun change.
Oh, I'm not stopping. You weren't watching last night.
Or you can call I don't watch any night. Or you can call it... The options are either everyone's got to be nice about Rishi, who nobody wanted, or accept Keir Starmer. And I am delighted with either of those options, honestly. I think Rishi seems fine. He was my preferred
What about
candidate.
Braverman? Were you celebrating that? Because
Well, no,
the left
because-
seemed to erupt in fury that there was actually a Conservative in a top
I
job.
think my issue was that she resigned for a very good reason, that if you're stupid enough to compromise security like that, you're an idiot and you shouldn't be trusted with any kind of... Hillary Clinton literally lost an election for that. And 1 week off, she basically got an extra week's holiday.
Amanda, I mean, I'm just finding the outrage.
You don't want to talk about Suella Braverman doing that at all.
I genuinely think
you keep calling her superwoman.
She is superwoman.
What
she
has
is
she done
superwoman
that's
because
good?
she's the only person that might save this government.
She hasn't done anything.
Well,
she's the same as Priti Patel. Lots of shouting about immigrants, done nothing
Well, she's been
yet.
in there for literally 6 weeks.
Yeah, and she's done nothing
Right.
in those 6 weeks.
And
I've got more done in the last 6 weeks than she has.
I'm not at all concerned about the so-called security breach. If you listen to people like Dominic Cummings, virtually every single minister, Amanda,
Why would you listen
forwards
to Dominic
emails
Cummings?
Of course they
from
do.
their
And the
work
thing is,
account to their Gmail account.
I think
big
that
deal.
It is a big deal. Do you understand how much Russia would love to be able to read all of your emails?
And you
China
don't
would
think
be able
Russia
to read
can't
all of
read
your
all our
emails.
emails anyway?
Well, don't make it easier for them by using Gmail.
You know what?
Look, I'm the kind of
Do you know
idiot
what?
who uses the same password for
Braverman
everything.
was stitched up. Braverman was stitched up.
Stitched up by
She
who?
is the woman...
That was her decision.
By the globalists who were... I mean, I don't know if you saw, Rebecca, by the way. There was a coup conducted against Liz Truss who had Jeremy Hunt and Grant Shapps enforced
So the
on her when
globalists
she
went
was
into
Prime
Suella
Minister.
Braverman's house and went, use your own email address, compromise security. Who made her do that? Whose idea was that?
Well, no,
whose responsibility was that?
And she took
She did it. She was an
responsibility
idiot.
for it by resigning.
By quitting.
And I am
she should have stayed
delighted
quitting.
that she's had 6 days on the naughty step and now she's back because she's probably the only person who I can trust to at least try and deal with the absolute mess that we've got.
I think you're in an
across this
abusive
country.
relationship with these women. I think you trust them too much. Priti Patel says, we'll get rid of them all. You believe her. Suella says, we'll get rid of them all. You believe them. Be less trusting, Dad.
I think that this is just really... I understand the point you're making, but I think it's absolutely low level in terms of what has cut through. But I'm slightly more concerned about who the kind of counsel that Rishi's getting at the moment, because he used that expression. He said, we've only got one shot to unite the party. I'm told reliably by an inside source that he originally said we've only got one stab at this. I made that up. But it's all bad. All the language is terrible. The language is terrible.
Matt Letizia, Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel, and there's more of those punchlines throughout the show.
No, they're not.
Coming up, as bold Brexiteer Braverman's return to the Home Office's salvages a wet reshuffle, I speak to Nigel Farage to get his take on why her reappointment is so crucial to solving the migrant crisis. He's live from the 9:40. But up next in The Clash, are you happy with the reshuffle and the infamous return of Michael Gove? I've reconvened my political masterminds for this story: grandee David Mallor, Conservative commentator Albion Ancona, broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and political commentators Emily Hewitson and Suzanne Evans. They're all with me to do battle next. I want to know what you think too, though. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. My Twitter handle @GBNews. Our poll running there too. See you in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Time now for The Clash. Now, breaking tonight, Michael Gove back in the cabinet, which I'm sure has left a sour taste in many Tory mouths, given his history of deceitful plotting. But the new PM promised to put the right people in the job and get Britain back on track. So was Sunak right to reappoint Gove to the cabinet despite his scheming against Truss and Johnson. Let me know your thoughts by emailing me at dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. We have a Twitter poll running there now, which you can vote into, and I'll bring you those results shortly. But here now to give their take, I'm joined by my political masterminds, the co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie and Mancona, the author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and the political commentators Emily Hewitson and Suzanne Evans. So look, Albie, I've been very critical about Gove. I know you're very supportive, so you know I want both sides of this argument. Why is it a good thing, Albie, to reward someone for plotting and scheming?
He's not been rewarded for plotting and scheming. He has been appointed as the Department for Housing, Levelling Up and Communities because of his merits. And often I talk about the fact that we need to be judging people on how talented they are and how good they are at their jobs. And Michael Gove has proved himself throughout his time in the cabinet to be an extremely competent minister, and especially when he was Secretary of State for Education, driving through the reforms such as academisation, which have led to amazing success stories in the education department, like the Michaela School led by Catherine Burble-Singh in Wembley. So if he can do for housing and local government and communities and levelling up what he did for education, I think he'll be an excellent asset to Rishi Sunak's cabinet.
But Christine Hamilton, isn't the issue with that's all well and good if you're doing exactly what he wants. But if he turns on you, Christine, then he will try and bring down a democratically elected Prime Minister. And I feel like he is being rewarded, Christine.
Well, ghastly Gove, on the maxim that you should keep your friends close and you should keep your enemies even closer, then Rishi's done the right thing. But let's be honest, Gove is a duplicitous shit. He really is. But on that basis, it's probably better to have him inside the tent peeing out than outside the tent peeing in. As you say, he stabbed Boris in the back. He stabbed Truss in the back. He was sacked by Theresa May. He was sacked by Johnson. You need to keep Gove where you can see him, and you need to be able to keep his hands on the table where you can see those. So possibly on that basis, it's better to have him in. Yes, of course, Albie's right. He is competent, but I really don't think it was necessary because there are plenty of other competent people who he could have brought in instead. But frankly, yes, probably better to have him inside the tent than out, but for all the wrong reasons. I wouldn't trust Gove, and I have personal experience of his duplicity. I wouldn't trust him further than I could throw.
Emily Hewitson, I believe you've also had personal experience with Gove. Who do you agree with, Christine or Albie?
I think a lot of people are quite surprised that I'm a big fan of Michael Gove. Like many, I used to think he was a bit of a snake, but actually I've come to see Boris and Michael Gove's relationship as a bit love-hate. And actually, I remember a few years ago when I was kind of up and coming on Twitter, I was at Conservative Party conference. You meet a lot of MPs there, and there's some that you see as people that you really like, and they turn out to be really horrible, and they kind of put their noses up at you. But anyway, I was just walking along conference, 19-year-old me. I hear an Emily. I turn around and it's none other than Michael Gove. And he says to me, Emily, I must say, I'm a huge fan of your Twitter. And I just thought, what a nice thing to say. He was rushing off with a lot of security and he still took the time to say that. I just thought, what a really nice man. And for all of his downfalls, and there are many, I do think he is a great speaker. He's got lots of experience. And at the end of the day, lots of people have snaked Boris and Truss. And a lot of people have hid behind anonymous letters. At least Gove is honest about his criticisms instead of hiding behind the 1922 anonymity.
No, I know. It's a tough one. No, I know what you're saying. Suzanne Evans, do folk like me and Christine just have to get over it? Do we just have to accept, OK, Gove was scheming in the past, but the Tories all have to come together now for the good of the country? Do we just have to move on from our concerns about Gove?
Well, I wouldn't say it's move on. I think it's more get real, really. Anyone that's spent any time around politics knows that backstabbing goes on all the time. And it doesn't matter what party it is, everybody does it. And if you're going to say, right, we are not going to have anyone in a cabinet who's never plotted, never schemed, frankly, there'd be no cabinet. Politics is a blood sport, and unfortunately it seems also sometimes to attract people that enjoy that kind of blood sport. So I think really it's not so much getting over it, we just have to put up with it. At the end of the day, Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister. You might disagree with how he got there, and plenty of people do, but he is the Prime Minister. He has to choose his cabinet, absolutely. And, he can choose whoever he wants in his cabinet.
Yeah, and look, as I said earlier, there were some highlights.
Keeping your enemies closer than your friends.
Yeah, and look, I agree, there were some highlights in the cabinet. So let's talk about the wider cabinet now. Lots of big appointments made. Albie Amankona, does it get a thumbs up from you overall? And who are you liking, who are you hating, who do you wish was in?
Look, I don't hate anyone in the cabinet. I think we have got a cabinet which reflects the broad church, which is the Conservative Party. Of course, there are some people on the cabinet who are maybe in a different wing of the Conservative Party than I am in. But ultimately, the downfall of the last Prime Minister, in my opinion, was not appointing a cabinet which was actually reflective of the diversity of opinion which is within the Conservative Party. And I think this cabinet actually does that. You've got people like Suella Braverman on the right of the party. You've got people like Jeremy Hunt, who I know you hate, Dan. You've got rising stars like Kemi Badenoch. Ultimately, all of these people need to be in a cabinet and on message in order for the Conservative Party to succeed. So I commend the Prime Minister for bringing this cabinet together.
How do you feel about it, Christine Hamilton?
Well, I agree with Albie to quite a large extent that he has done what Liz Truss failed to do, which is to bring all the wings of the party together. I know he's reappointed a lot of people, and there are anybody is going to criticise various different appointments. I mean, for example, I think Penny Mordaunt has paid the price for taking it right up to the wire at 2 o'clock. Was it only yesterday or the day before? Yesterday.
Yesterday, I know, it feels like an age ago.
Have had a bigger office than just remaining as leader of the House. But no, he has. He's brought in a bit of everybody. And let's be honest, whatever people think of Rishi Sunak, whatever people think of what has gone on, it is in the interests of all of us that he succeeds. So I honestly think we've all, Tory, Labour, whatever you are, we have all got to put all this nonsense behind us, and we've all got to pull together and hope to God that Rishi does succeed. However much you might dislike him, dislike the way he's done this, that and the other, but if they don't succeed, we are finished.
Well, I do agree with that, actually. I want to talk about one of my personal highlights, Emily Hewitson. It's an odd portfolio, Transport Secretary, but Mark Harper is there, and Mark Harper is someone who I've wanted to see return to Cabinet for a long time because he was one of the few freedom fighters in terms of senior Tories throughout the entire COVID pandemic. So I'm delighted to see him back in the Cabinet.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, as the appointments were going on, I was starting to get a bit worried that he had been missed because he was such a prominent anti-lockdown voice for so many. And I'm really, really happy to see him. I'm also happy to see the likes of Kemi and Suella. I do think we have kind of one big glaring miss here, and I would have liked to see Boris as party chairman. I think that is the perfect role for him, but obviously that didn't quite happen. But I think overall it's a very pro-unity cabinet. I think he's made some really good choices, some clever choices. He's kind of gone for experience and the right person for the job, rather than Liz Truss, who just made some bizarre appointments based on who she was friends with. So I have to commend Rishi for that.
OK, final word to you, Suzanne Evans.
Yeah, I'm liking this cabinet, actually. I think it's very good. And I'd just like to, to make the point that it's quite interesting that he's kept a lot of Liz Truss's people in place, like Suella Braverman, like James Cleverly, just to give two examples. There are more. And I didn't think that proves, doesn't it? Liz didn't get it all wrong.
No, indeed, and good to see Ben Wallace stay as Secretary of Defence too. OK, so overall, from all of you, broad thumbs up for the first Sunak cabinet. Our political commentator, Suzanne Evans, thank you so much. Thank you too to co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona, the author and broadcaster, Christine Hamilton, and the political commentator, Emily Hewitson. But who do you agree with there? Was Rishi Sunak right to reappoint Gove to cabinet? Ali on Twitter says Gove should be nowhere near government. I accept that he gets jobs done, but he is completely untrustworthy. Rishi had better watch out. Maybe the idea is to keep him close. From Mark, Sunak was the schemer-in-chief, so it's entirely expected that Gove is back. And from Alex on the email, I will only consider staying a Tory voter because of Braverman, no one else. Gove, Hunt and Shapps are totally arrogant politicians. And your verdict is now in. 25% of you, a quarter of our viewers agreeing that Rishi's appointment of Gove was the right thing to do. 75% of you against it. Now, coming up, after Boris bottled his botched leadership bid, does that mean he's given up on an extraordinary return as PM? His biographer and longtime friend Andrew Jimson reveals all on the likelihood of a Bojo comeback live at 9:50. But first, as Superwoman Sue Alish salvages the reshuffle by re-entering Cabinet as Home Secretary, Nigel Farage joins me to explain why her return is so vital for trying to tackle the illegal invasion via the channel. He's live with me straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
What the Farage time now, and Nigel, amid a Rishi Sunak cabinet filled to the brim with, let's be honest, Tory wits and globalists like Jeremy Hunt, There was a notable bright spark in Suella Braverman getting reappointed. Nigel, of course, the left have erupted in outrage. The Ramonas, like David Gauke, have erupted in outrage. For me, I think this has to be a good thing, partly just because of their reaction. Do you think she can be the woman, Nigel, now that she's back in the job, to finally deal with the Channel invasion?
Only if she's allowed to be. You see, Priti Patel, who was there before her, and right, yeah, I'll be honest, I mean, no one criticised her more than me. I branded her pretty useless, and it stuck. And doing that to a friend is not very nice in one way. But you have to be allowed to do what you need to do. Now, Braverman, who I do like and do admire very much indeed, she put her finger on it in her previous very short stint as Home Secretary, that unless we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, we're not going to go anywhere. Now, her being put back in, initially I thought, hooray, this is terrific. And then I realised all Sunak had done was to leaven the bread, was to say to the world, look, you're on the right of the Conservative Party, you should be happy, despite the fact this is a complete globalist takeover. And I will predict here and now that she will not be allowed to do the things that she wants to do. I wouldn't be surprised if within a year we see a second Braverman resignation.
I think you could be right. Now, Nigel, I think it's really important, actually. We talk about the word that you just used, and I used it earlier in the intro, and let's be honest, we've been using it for months and months, Nigel. The word globalist, which is defined, Nigel, as you know, in the Oxford Dictionary as a person who advocates the interpretation or planning of economic and foreign policy in relation to events and developments throughout the world. But, Nigel, something very disturbing has happened over the past week. We've both been dragged into this. The left and big portions of the mainstream media are now trying to reframe the word globalist as somehow being anti-Semitic. Now, to me, this looks like an attempt to shut down free speech. How do you feel about it?
Well, I was there before you, Dan, and only because my show's on before you. And I called Jeremy Hunt globalist, there was no problem. I called Grant Shapps globalist, as you did, an hour or two after me on GB News, and they all went ballistic. Now, this is because Shapps apparently is Jewish. I got to tell you, Dan, I didn't know he was Jewish, but so what?
No, I didn't know either. I had absolutely no idea he was Jewish. Oh, has Nigel just frozen there? That's a shame. Hopefully we'll get Nigel back in a moment. But I absolutely agree, actually, with Nigel, because I had no idea that Grant Shapps was Jewish either. Sorry, Nigel, Oh, I think we've got you back. Oh, no, we don't. I had absolutely no idea that Grant Shapps was Jewish either. I think what is so disturbing about this move now is that when you throw around terms like anti-Semitic, like racist, to try and shut down debate and get words banned, what you're doing is actually belittling real racism that goes on so much around the world. And it has been really horrible, actually, to watch over the past week, to see a once great radio station like LBC, where Nigel used to work, actually ban folk, stop callers in their tracks from using the word globalist. And when that happens, all I think is, number one, we're turning into a censorship state. And number two, why are they so worried about the use of the word? What are they trying to hide? Why do they want to stop the word being used? Is it because, Nigel Farage, we've got you back now, is it because, Nigel Farage, actually they don't want us to discuss the World Economic Forum and some of the nefarious forces which are trying to interfere in British politics?
Of course. And so what they do is they try and bully us, and we go, oh, I'm so sorry, I apologise, I'll back off, I won't use the word again. And that's the problem. That's the problem with the modern-day British Conservative Party, that it actually flails and runs away from every one of these issues rather than standing up and confronting it. And I'm very proud to say that at GB News, me and thee don't flail and don't back off and don't walk away. And it just shows you, when we have the period of Conservative opposition, which is inevitable, this pretense today at Happy Families. I've put this cabinet together, a cabinet of all the talents. No, it's not a cabinet of all the talents. It's a cabinet of all the wings of the Conservative Party. And we're all going to be happy ever after. No, cobblers. It'll fall to pieces within a couple of weeks. They will lose the next election. They might stave off a general election, but they'll lose it. And it shows you why. And this is interesting. In opposition, GB News suddenly is going to become one of the most important political forces in the land, because we will have a chance to shape the narrative. And prior to our existence, there was no one there to do it. So let's not be
And actually, Nigel, quite the opposite. Sorry, Nigel, I just wanted to talk quickly about the BBC, because I know it's been an extraordinary week, right? But I have to ask you about this shocking moment when the news was announced that Boris was not going to be in the race, and this is how the BBC reacted during a live news broadcast.
Well, this is all very exciting, isn't it? Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. Am I allowed to be this gleeful? Well, I am.
Now, Nigel, that woman, Martine Croxall, has now been suspended from the BBC. She's been taken off air. But actually, doesn't that just show you what we're up against?
She's been taken off for a week, Dan. She'll be back. I mean, come on. And her pay won't be docked either. I mean, don't talk nonsense. Look, that is a classic case of what we call the mask slipping. Our problem is this. There is a globalist agenda. It's backed by big business. It's backed by trade unions. It's backed by most of big media. It's backed by social media. Hey, you know what? It's the same as the Brexit battle that I fought for nearly a quarter of a century. These are the challenges. But what June 23rd, 2016 shows you is it can be overcome. So, folks at home, listening to this on the radio, wherever you are, in your car, wherever you are, we are not here at GB News to depress you. We're here at GB News to tell you the truth. We're here at GB News to hear all sides of arguments. But we're also here at GB News to offer you solutions. And I promise you, we're going to have a bigger say in shaping the future of the Conservative Party from opposition than literally anybody else.
Nigel Farage, what a point to end it on. Great show tonight. And of course, Nigel back at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, right here. Nigel, thank you so much. But coming up after 10, as Rishi Sunak lays claim to Boris's 2019 election landslide, does he really have a mandate to govern? My superstar panel, including Matt Decizier, return to debate that after a look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But next, Boris biographer and longtime friend Andrew Chinsim reveals all on the likelihood of a Bojo comeback. He's tonight's outsider, straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Boris Johnson biographer Andrew Jinsum is tonight's outsider. And a magnanimous Bojo offered his support to Rishi Sunak today, burying the hatchet with his former Chancellor as the Tory party tries to unite around the new PM. Johnson tweeted congratulations to Rishi Sunak on this historic day. This is the moment for every Conservative to give our new PM their full and wholehearted support. So, does that mean Boris's ambitions of a return to number 10 are dead and buried, or is he just biding his time? I mean, let's not forget the hints he dropped during his valedictory speech in Westminster just last month.
Like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough, and I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support.
Many Tory MPs were gutted about the former PM's decision to withdraw from the race, and he is a proven election winner, of course. So could he make a Churchillian comeback to number 10 still? Well, one man who knows Boris very well is Andrew, the author of Boris Johnson, The Rise and Fall of a Troublemaker, at number 10, and he joins me now live. So, Andrew, you've known Boris for more than 30 years. Obviously, it was a setback at the weekend. But do you think his frontline political career is over?
Almost certainly not. Anyone less likely to walk away and to live quietly, live out his days quietly somewhere deep in the heart of the British countryside, sort of doing work for local good causes than Boris Johnson. It's just unimaginable. And what he's just shown is his absolutely intense desire to come back. He's obviously got to stand aside at the moment. He's got to give Rishi Sunak and everyone a fair crack at it. But Boris rescued the Tories from your last guest, Nigel Farage, in 2019. And if the Tories need rescuing again, then Boris may well get another chance.
It's true, isn't it, that he absolutely wants to emulate Winston Churchill. He loves the idea of this comeback. Of course, Churchill had to wait many years, didn't he? Do you think Boris is prepared to wait that long? And the other question is, do you think he would be prepared to be leader of the opposition, or will he try and mount a comeback if Sunak doesn't improve the poll ratings before the next election?
Well, one of his gifts as a journalist as well as a politician is his understanding. And lots of people get locked in some orthodoxy. Boris sees an opportunity absolutely in a split second and will then go for it. If it involves being leader of the opposition, he'll do that. The comparison with Churchill is interesting, but actually he's more like Benjamin Disraeli. And Disraeli also had to keep going and had one brief go at being Prime Minister and then did come back for a second longer stint. So it's absolutely on. And Boris, I mean, most politicians, or many politicians, become incredibly boring. Boris's use of language, his ability to transform the atmosphere, if he walks into a sort of a shopping centre on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, he's the person who can change the atmosphere. And he hasn't lost that, and he's not that old either. He can go off and make a great deal of money, give speeches, write his book about this obscure playwright called William Shakespeare, and, of course, be ready to be called, as he puts it, from the plough like Cincinnatus.
Now, look, he did have to send that tweet today, didn't he? But talk to me about the relationship between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, because it's not warm these days, is it, Andrew?
It's not. I don't think it's frozen either. Of course it's not warm, and of course they're different, quite different temperaments. But Boris Johnson did make Rishi Sunak Chancellor of the Exchequer, an enormous promotion for someone who only got into Parliament in 2015, and I think would respect Sunak's abilities. Of course, Sunak is a moralist, and Sunak really is a roundhead, and Boris is a cavalier. So they are completely different temperaments, but they did actually manage to work together through the pandemic without actually coming to blows. So I don't think. I mean, that's one of the things you have to do in politics. You have to be capable of working with people with whom you don't agree in every particular and whose temperaments are different to yours. But of course, the plain truth is that Boris Johnson will only come back if the Tory party... Well, the Tory party is in desperate trouble, but it's Sunak who's mounting the rescue bid. If this rescue bid fails, the Tories lose an election, Labour comes in, then... the question will be whether to go for Boris or whether to go for someone completely new.
How damaged do you think Boris is within the party by the decision to pull out? Because I've spoken to a lot of Tory MPs who adore Boris, Andrew, but are very angry that he left them in the lurch. And it also gave the Tory right absolutely no opportunity to unite behind another character like Suella Braverman, for example.
That has damaged him. There seemed, early on in the race that's just taken place, it seemed that perhaps Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch would row in behind Boris Johnson, and he would become that he would actually develop sufficient momentum to win. And that didn't happen. They've gone in with Sunak. So in the short term, I mean, it was much too soon. Maybe he had to show keenness, because if you don't show keenness, people think, oh, well, you're not interested anymore. But it was actually much too soon. The wounds of a few months ago are still very, very raw. Those 60 Conservatives who refused to serve under Boris Johnson. You can't heal that sort of thing in a few months. It's going to take a few years, but it's not impossible. Stranger things have happened, even in recent politics, and certainly in political history.
Boris Johnson biographer Andrew Jinsome, author of Boris Johnson, The Rise and Fall of a Troublemaker at number 10. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's just been another jaw-dropping day in British politics with Rishi Sunak formally installed as the country's new Prime Minister just weeks after being roundly rejected by members of the Conservative Party. But as Fishy Rishi cherry-picks a brand new cabinet and sets out his cautious vision for Britain, can he seriously make this claim?
Mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual.
They stake in the Boris mega majority, and what about the future of Liz Truss as a prominent backbencher? I'll delve into all of the big talking points with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, football legend Matt Letizia, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Also coming up, Boris loyalist and former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale says he's ready to turn a new leaf and rally behind Sunak. But can this ungovernable party really be united? I'll ask the prominent Tory about the understandable fury amongst Johnsonites at 10:20. As gay rights campaigner and friend of the show Peter Tatchell heroically stages a protest in Qatar and gets arrested, should England and Wales be boycotting next month's World Cup? And the people of Qatar might be suffering from human rights abuses, but have you heard what Meghan Markle has had to endure?
I'm particular. I think a high tide raises all ships, right?
Yeah.
Stop whispering and tiptoeing around it. Just say what it is that you need. You're allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to be clear. It does not make you demanding. It does not make you difficult.
Sure it doesn't. Brace yourself for even more hard luck stories from her Montecito mansion in our media bus at 10:30. Plus, the supposed British institution Channel 4 went woke crazy over the weekend after it aired a naked trans performer playing the piano with their, well, you know what I mean. But as the NHS publishes new guidelines that states most children identifying as trans are simply going through a, quote, transient phase, is common sense finally prevailing in the face of extremism? Well, social commentator Layla Halpin uncancelled on that at 10:50. And finally, after offending a couple of waiters, a humiliated James Corden has issued a grovelling apology.
I've been walking around thinking that I hadn't done anything wrong, right? But the truth is, I have. I made a rude comment.
But was he right to give in to the easy-to-offend online mob? My unfiltered take on that Hollywood story coming up shortly. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages as they drop, and as ever, brand new Greatest Britain Union Jackass crowned before the night is out. But before all of that, the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. The new Prime Minister has been appointing his top cabinet today, with 6 ministers reappointed to the same role. That includes Jeremy Hunt staying on as Chancellor, but whether or not he'll publish his fiscal plan next Monday is still not yet clear. Dominic Raab is returning as Deputy Prime Minister and also holds the portfolio of Justice. James Cleverly remains at the Foreign Office as Foreign Secretary, Ben Wallace retaining Defence, and Suella Braverman is Home Secretary once again, less than a week after she resigned over a breach of the ministerial code. Grant Shapps is Business Secretary, and Penny Mordaunt remains as Leader of the House of Commons. Other appointments that took place today include Kemi Badenoch, who returns as International Trade Secretary, and Michael Gove, who returns as Levelling Up Secretary after being sacked by Boris Johnson in July. Meanwhile, Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the new Prime Minister will not deliver for working people. But the Prime Minister has spoken to the Ukrainian President this evening, underlining the UK's continued solidarity and support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. Downing Street said Mr Sunak and US President Joe Biden have also had a call this evening saying they're looking forward to working closely together. Earlier on today, in his first speech as Prime Minister, Mr Sunak vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's leadership, and he pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government. But he warned the country is facing difficult decisions ahead.
I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are.
Well, let's not forget the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who bid farewell to Number 10 today, saying brighter days lie ahead. In her final speech from Downing Street, Liz Truss praised her government, saying they had acted urgently and decisively, and she spoke of cutting taxes. She also urged her replacement, Mr Sunak, to be bold. Well, in other news today, 6 men suspected of being part of a people-smuggling gang involved in illegal channel crossings have been arrested in France. Several boats, as well as over 100 life jackets, have been seized from a garage in northern France. The group's accused of storing boats which would have been used by migrants to travel across the English Channel to the UK. This comes as 2 residents in Dover told GB News this evening they'd found a teenager in one of their bedrooms who was a migrant after 30 migrants went missing last week. New figures show the price of low-cost groceries like pasta, tea and cooking oil have soared. The Office for National Statistics says budget items have increased by about 17% over the last 12 months. That comes as inflation returned to a 40-year high, with prices up 10.1% in a year. Food prices were the biggest driver of higher living costs last month. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Let's get back to Dan Wootton.
Tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. First front pages are with me. Let's get straight to them. The Independent reports that voters demand election as Sunak claims mandate, with polls showing that 2/3 of Brits want to say in who is leading the country. The Metro leads with Kings can only get better in response to Rishi Sunak being officially installed as PM today. After a 37-minute meeting with King Charles, the first appointment of his reign, Sunak addressed the nation at Downing Street. The Eye splashes with Rishi Sunak's crisis cabinet, made up of both political rivals and loyalists, as he attempts to unify the warring Tories. And the Daily Star. In, out, shake it all about. They compare Rishi's cabinet reshuffle to the hokey-cokey. The paper adds that pals of Lettuce Liz have got the chop. My superstar panel back with me now. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Plattel, England football legend and social commentator Matt Le Tissier, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, despite delivering her farewell speech with the new title of shortest-serving Prime Minister ever ringing in her ears, Liz Truss cut a defiant figure today, defending her bold approach to the bitter end. She offered no apology for the financial situation which accompanied her 50-day reign. Why should she? But she did double down on her infamous low-tax, high-growth economic vision for the UK, dubbed Trussonomics.
From my time as Prime Minister, I am more convinced than ever that we need to be bold and confront the challenges that we face. We simply cannot afford to be a low-growth country where the government takes up an increasing share of our national wealth. I know that brighter days lie ahead.
I don't care what any of the Be Kind left have to say. I actually feel deeply sorry on a human level for Liz Truss. But never far from proceedings, the shadow of another former PM loomed even larger over the day, despite his undemocratic ousting. It was Boris Johnson who achieved a clear mandate from the country after being handed an 80-seat majority for the Tories in the 2019 general election. Today, though, newly appointed PM Fishy Rishi, who, of course, got the job without a single vote being cast, made this odd attempt at playing down that mandate.
I will always be grateful to Boris Johnson for his incredible achievements as Prime Minister, and I know he would agree that the mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual. It is a mandate that belongs to and unites all of us.
OK, so Amanda Plattel, two former Tory Prime Ministers now loom large over Sunak in different ways.
I cannot believe you felt sorry for Liz Truss.
I feel deeply sorry for Liz Truss.
I feel really sorry for Liz Truss. I think she's having a nervous breakdown.
You're both insane. You're both having nervous breakdowns.
No.
Amanda, you feel nothing on a human level for what this woman has to face now for the rest of her life?
I feel absolutely nothing for a woman who, in the speech that you've just been referring to, she showed no remorse, no apologies to the millions of homeowners who can't afford their houses anymore. She bungled the whole thing. She backstabbed her own Chancellor as soon as she got the chance to blame him to try and get herself out of it. And frankly, and then as they were weeping with tears of joy at Chequers as they were unpacking all her stuff up at the weekend, she said, well, I've no regrets. I'm relieved to be out of it. At least I got to be Prime Minister. That is a shocking thing to say. That is a person who does not understand for one moment the damage that she's done to the Tory party and the damage she's done to the country.
OK, I accept a lot of that from Amanda, but you have to concede there were dark forces working against Liz Truss.
There were a lot of dark forces working against her, and yes, she made mistakes. It would be nice if we would actually see people owning up to those mistakes when they've got a chance to, when they're doing these speeches of such high profile. I think a lot of people might have a few more better words to say about politicians if they did that and showed a little bit of contrition now and then. So from that point of view, I do feel a little bit sorry for her. But that is, I know it's different. That's on a human, like you, on a human level.
I'm a human being too. It's like, stop
There's
saying...
no sympathetic column coming from Amanda Patel
Stop
on the
saying
Daily Mail this Saturday.
like I'm an alien on, you know, on
No,
the
but I think
sofa.
there are ways that you can go about criticising somebody, and I think Dan's right. I think there were some dark forces that were working against
And they
her.
were out to get
and if I think they very much were. And if the financial markets and if the people at the World Economic Forum are gunning for somebody, I kind of tend to take the view that actually what they were saying was probably better off for us than what it was for them.
Well, it shows you how difficult it is for someone to go against narrative. Sorry, Amanda.
Sorry, Dan, I shouldn't interrupt you. How dare I?
Oh, you do it. I'm used to it now. Go on.
I'd like to ask Kwasi how much sympathy he felt for Liz when he was watching that speech.
Yeah.
Frankly.
No, I completely agree.
No, I
she
agree
should
with
never
that as
have U-turned. She should never have thrown Kwasi Kwarteng under the bus. But I just do feel that it was almost an impossible task.
Also, it's a different level of public humiliation for her. That's going to be for the rest of her life. That's her defining characteristic. She presumably...
Now, no matter what she does now, she can't move on from
And
that, no
presumably
matter what
she
she does.
literally moved house. Like, she presumably had to move her children's schools. There are so... Well, I don't know where she lived before, but possibly. She's defined her life as somebody who failed. That is miserable. I feel bad for anybody in that position.
Yeah, no, I do too. Then, of course, the other bloke looming large today, Amanda, Boris. And I thought that comment from Sunak was really outrageous, actually, trying to rewrite history and basically say, oh, actually, 2019, it was nothing to do with you. I didn't like that, Amanda.
It was completely, apart from being unchivalrous, it was a complete lie. I mean, Rishi Sunak, to this date, has been elected by, I think it's 19,550 fine folk in a Yorkshire seat. That has been the only election he's ever won, plus the seats he got from 200-plus MPs. He was not elected to that. That was Boris's, you know, and it does him no credit to not accept the fact.
And he wasn't
No,
talking
but
about his
kindness. Everybody here knows that the way that you get elected is that you are nominated. You are an MP for one area. A mandate doesn't go to a.
I know,
We don't vote for a
Rebecca,
prime minister.
months earlier,
we vote
though,
for our
but
MPs.
months earlier, literally months earlier, the Tories were facing an extinction level event because of the Brexit Party and Nigel Farage, and it was only Boris who saved the party from that.
You are very welcome to have that opinion. It's not how I.
It's not an opinion; it's a fact.
Okay.
I mean, we don't do alternative truth here. How can you say that is not a fact?
Yeah, no spin, no bias,
Exactly.
alternative truth.
Well, it's a fact.
Constant spin, constant bias.
It's an absolute fact. Well, you're here.
I'm biased too. We're all biased, but I don't pretend not to be.
At least we get both sides of it. That's what the no bias
I
is.
suppose does that equal out as no bias somewhere in the middle? Anyway, my point is that literally how it works is that you do not vote for a prime minister. I wish that we did.
I understand how our constitutional system works, but I'm talking practically and morally. It was Boris Johnson who won that election.
We should be having a general election, 100%. But I think you believe the mandate can pass from person to person with no election, or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then general election.
I just didn't really think it was necessary, right, for Sunak.
He's actually, and what he's shown in both his comments about Liz Truss and his comments about Boris is that he's actually quite a small man, and he's actually quite spiteful, as he demonstrated.
Stop talking about his height.
Sorry?
Stop talking about his height.
A lot of work goes into hiding that.
And also, I thought it was an act of kind of pure malice to put Penny back in the job as leader of Penny Morton. As leader
that was mean. That was a little bit of a
He's a meanie. He's a meanie midget. Meanie Penny, I meant.
How do you feel about Rishi Sunak?
How do I feel about Rishi Sunak?
You were sobbing a minute ago in sympathy, along with Rebecca.
Obviously, I'm very conflicted because obviously Rishi is from Southampton.
Yes.
And was
and he
a
has...
Southampton Football Club supporter.
No.
And
he has certain views about you, Matt.
And he has certain views about me. He used to go and watch Southampton play in the mid-90s, and he enjoyed the way I played football. He probably doesn't enjoy my commentary over the past
Rebecca,
couple of
just
years.
to explain, let's let Rishi Sunak talk about Matt in his own words. What?
James Ward-Prowse or Matthew Le Tissier?
Oh, gosh. So look, my childhood hero is Matthew Le Tissier, but my mum, funnily enough, who now has my season ticket at St Mary's, is a huge James Ward-Prowse fan.
Okay, so you are Rishi Sunak's childhood hero, and you're slagging him off, Matt. You're slagging him off.
Can you imagine if Taylor Swift was mean about me?
That just makes me feel old. Do you know what I mean? But I'm very black and white in my opinions, and just because somebody thinks very highly of me doesn't mean that I have to reciprocate that because of I have some very different views to him.
No, indeed. Now, look, last week James Corden landed himself in some hot water after he was barred from the New York restaurant Balthazar for being, quote, extremely nasty to its staff. The comedian and Late Late Show host hoped that laying low would be enough to make the trouble go away, but the power of the social media mob, the Be Kind mob, you know, all of those nice people on Twitter, proved too much, and last night he capitulated with a grovelling apology. Watch.
As some of you may have seen, last week there were stories about me being banned from a restaurant. I've been walking around thinking that I hadn't done anything wrong, right? But the truth is, like I have, I made a rude comment. I get it. I totally understand. I understand everybody getting upset, and I accept everybody's opinion. I also hate, as I said to the owner that day, that I've ever upset anybody, ever. It was never my intention. It just wasn't. And I love that restaurant. I love the staff there. I hope I'm allowed in again one day. So when I'm back in New York, I can go there and apologise in person, which is something I will absolutely do.
No, James, just stop. I mean, that full apology went on for a whole 4.5 minutes. Do you know, I would have ignored the social media Be Kind warriors if I were him, because they now scent blood, don't they? Wow. Just don't respond, right?
No, respond succinctly. 4.5 minutes. Listen, I realise I didn't behave well and I apologise to the person in question. End. Done.
Wow. And I wish the waitress had just said to him, just leave the restaurant, fatty. You've eaten too much already.
Amanda, take that back. Take that back.
Sorry, what was
oh,
wrong with
my
that?
goodness, he's a beautiful man.
He is hugely fat.
Do you like him?
Oh, God. So what, now I'm going to be shamed for liking James Corden. And do you know what? I just don't join the bandwagon of we all should hate James Corden. I'm proud of his success in the US. I think we've got a tall poppy syndrome when it comes to wanting to tear James Corden down. And you know what? If he's a little bit rude to a waiter, we don't need to pile on because of that.
Damn.
It's not good. But a 4.5-minute apology, come on, just move on.
That is the most controversial thing I've ever heard you say.
Oh, well, that's saying something. Rebecca Reed, Matt, Amanda Patel, 275, because coming up, as our friend Peter Tatchell is arrested for staging a gay rights protest in Qatar, should England and Wales boycott the World Cup, and should FIFA give Iran's World Cup spot to Ukraine as they come under pressure to expel the rogue state in favour of the war-torn European nation? That's a controversial one. Good to have Matt here for it, so we'll debate it with the Superstar panel after 10:30. But next, Boris loyalist and former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale says he's ready to turn over a new leaf and rally behind Rishi Sunak. But can his ungovernable party really be united? So I'll ask the prominent Tory about the understandable fury among Johnsonites straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. Now, after winning the botched Tory leadership race yesterday, Rishi Sunak's instant message to his MPs was to, quote, unite or die. Of course, many in the party will struggle to forgive Sunak after he brutally stabbed Boris Johnson in the back when he served as Chancellor and then allowed his allies to destabilise Liz Truss from the moment she took over. Conservative MP and former Culture Secretary Sir John Whittingdale had reportedly planned to vote for Boris if he chose to run. However, following his withdrawal from the contest, he pledged allegiance to Sunak yesterday morning. I'm delighted to say that the party grandee, former Cabinet Minister, joins me now. So, John, look, you appear willing to get behind our new Prime Minister for the good of the party, the good of the country. But can you understand, John, why tonight lots of your members, you know, the folk who helped get you elected, feel very disillusioned about the fact that they weren't given a vote?
Well, yes, I can, and some of my members have already been in touch to express that. But what we need is to have a leader who commands the support of the parliamentary party. Rishi Sunak now does that. And I think that to have a vote of the party would have prolonged it, and potentially the worst thing that could have happened is actually what happened with Liz Truss, which was that one candidate won a majority of MPs, and then the membership rejected that person and chose a different person. And in a sense, that was the start of a problem, that Liz Truss didn't have a majority of MPs supporting her, and as a result, the party remained very divided. I think the fact that Rishi Sunak can command the overwhelming majority, actually, of MPs' support now is the best chance we have of uniting the party and moving forward.
Now, look, obviously you have been a Boris loyalist. You're also very close to his wife, Carrie. Lots of people, like me, were so disappointed that he decided not to run. I'm convinced he would have won with the membership in an overwhelming manner. So what went on this weekend, John? Why did he decide not to put his name forward, given he did have, and it's verified by the 1922 committee, he did have the 100 nominations required?
He did. He had 102, so we're told. I'm absolutely certain he passed the threshold, and therefore he was qualified to run as a candidate in that election. But 102 was only just over the mark. And I go back to beginning of my political career. I worked for Margaret Thatcher. I was with her when she was challenged for the leadership by Michael Heseltine. She got a majority of MPs supporting her, but she didn't quite reach the threshold which was then in place. And she decided not to contest in the second round. And I remember saying to her a few weeks later, actually, if you'd gone ahead and fought in the second round, I believe you could still have won. And she looked at me and said it wouldn't have mattered because it would have divided the party so badly that it would have been impossible really to move forward. And I think that was the judgment that Boris made. He had the support of 102, which got him over that threshold, but it meant that 2/3 of the party hadn't supported him. And I think even if the membership had decided to elect him, it would have meant a continuation of the division that unfortunately has been the big problem for the party for some time. Whereas Rishi Sunak was able to command a substantial majority of MPs, and I think there is a willingness on the whole of the parliamentary party to support him, which would not have been there, to my sadness, if Boris Johnson had become leader again.
Is this the end of Boris Johnson's frontline political career?
I don't think you can ever say it's the end of a career. I mean, I served in David Cameron's cabinet. Theresa May sacked me because we didn't agree about certain things, and I thought, oh no, that was that. And then I came back as a minister again. So politics is unpredictable, and you can never tell what's going to happen next. So, and Boris is a person of huge talent. So I would never write off Boris Johnson.
So there could still be a Churchillian comeback.
Well, who knows? I mean, I would like, obviously, the Conservative Party to go on to win the next election. I hope that Rishi Sunak succeeds as Prime Minister. But, you know, I mean, I wouldn't ever say that Boris is... You're never going to hear from Boris Johnson again. I think that is unlikely.
No, indeed, I agree. Former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Whittingdale, thank you so much. Now, coming up, as the NHS publishes new guidance that states most children identifying as transgender are simply going through a transient phase, is it common sense that's now finally prevailing in the face of trans extremism? Social commentator Leah Halpin is uncancelled on that at 10:40. But next in the media buzz, as gay rights campaigner and friend of the show Peter Tatchell heroically stages a protest in Qatar and gets arrested, should England and Wales be boycotting next month's World Cup? My superstar panel, including Matt Le Tissier, return to debate that straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Let's return to tomorrow's news site now on our Media Buzz. More front pages in. Rishi undaunted, according to the Daily Express. New Resolute PM vowed to earn the nation's trust by tackling the economic crisis head-on. The Daily Telegraph leads on Rishi's promise and dig at his predecessor that he'll fix the mistakes made. New PM has warned of difficult decisions ahead as he brings Michael Gove back into the cabinet to, quote, reflect a unified party. The Guardian also reports on Rishi's cabinet reshuffle, branding it a gamble. Leave it to me, Your Majesty, writes the Daily Mail. The paper says that Sunak is hoping his so-called unity cabinet will be able to fix the mistakes made by Truss. And on the front page of The Sun, Rishi tells Downing Street's Larry the Cat, at least I got rid of the other Mog, of course, referring to the Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was one of 11 from the Truss top team to be sacked today. And again, I think that's a bad move, getting rid of Jacob Rees-Mogg. A very bad move. More in the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, former England footballer Matt Le Tissier, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, today, regular guest here at GB News and human rights activist Peter Tatchell was arrested in Qatar for staging a peaceful protest in support of gay rights. He was eventually released, but this is the moment he was confronted by police in the Gulf state, where homosexuality is legal and punishable by up to 7 years in prison. The shocking arrest exposes the moral repugnance of, or some would say, hosting the World Cup in the authoritarian Arab state, and has again raised serious questions about whether England and Wales should even be playing at the tournament. But it's not the only political crisis engulfing the troubled tournament. Governing body FIFA are now under pressure to axe Iran from the competition and give its place over to Ukraine over the former country's involvement in Putin's invasion. In a statement, a Ukrainian football team said Shakhtar Football Club calls on FIFA and the entire international community to immediately ban Iran's national team from playing at the World Cup for the country's direct participation in terrorist attacks on Ukrainian. And then the human rights group Open Stadiums wrote an open letter to FIFA stating, we ask FIFA, based on Articles 3 and 4 of its statutes, to immediately expel Iran from the World Cup in Qatar. So Articles 3 and 4 of FIFA's statute reference their commitment to upholding human rights and non-discrimination. So, Matt Le Tissier, obviously lots going on with this World Cup. Personally, I actually hate to see politics and football collide in this way, although I absolutely love the fact that Peter Tatchell has the balls to actually go there and confront Qatar. He is a very brave man, whatever you think of his politics. But what do you make of these latest calls now to try and, say, evict Iran from the tournament to bring in Ukraine?
I find it a little bit concerning. I'm like you. I think politics needs to keep the hell out of sport, first and foremost. My thoughts as a sportsman would go towards those Iranian footballers who have probably spent their whole life wishing and wanting to play in a World Cup, something that I never got to do. And the fact that they've worked their socks off to get into that position, I'm not sure that they should be stripped of that because of the actions of politicians, quite frankly.
No, and the thing is, we're going down such a slippery slope here, aren't we, Amanda?
I just think the die is set and all this. That's a very good point that you make, because, you know, it is a lifelong dream for a footballer to end up at a World Cup. But the die was set when we first accepted this, what was clearly a corrupt deal that was all done by money being paid behind back and bribes.
We shouldn't be having it.
The whole thing was disgusting from the very beginning.
But then if you don't think we should have it in Qatar, then that's allowing politics to enter into it. I agree we shouldn't. We shouldn't be having it in November. It should be in the summer.
But that's an opinion,
rubbish,
right?
terrible for pubs.
That's an opinion that I have. But the issue is that it is in Qatar.
Yeah,
and so
politics have got involved, which means the conversation
Well,
is
I
now
think
political.
politics have only got involved, Matt, because under Southgate, the England team have turned themselves into moral arbiters by insisting on taking the knee before every game for some sort of anti-racist gesture, when they're then going to a country where women and gay people are second-class citizens. That's where I think the hypocrisy
But aren't they going to wear the little rainbow armband?
That will make a big difference, won't it?
I find it quite strange, actually, that nobody actually realises the irony in Ukraine wanting Iran thrown out of the World Cup for human rights issues and then wanting to go to Qatar to play in their World Cup with all the human rights issues that have gone on there. So that, for me, is a situation that kind of nobody's really highlighting.
But there are two separate things here. Ukraine shouldn't get a free ticket to play more football because they've had a hard time. That's not how that works.
Okay, so you
That's just silly.
So you think Iran should stay in the
No,
tournament?
it's not like when you get a pony because you broke your leg or whatever. That's not. Rebecca, it's not a very relatable childhood
One minute
anecdote,
you're
is it?
blubbing over Liz Truss, and the next you're being really cruel about footballers and Ukrainian football players.
Because I don't think that just because...
That's the hard heart of the left.
No, that's not the hard heart of the left. It's just completely no logical correlation between there's been a very unfortunate war in your country, so come play some football. No logical sense. Iran should be kicked out instantly. The situation in Iran is probably one of the worst things happening in the world right now, without question, actually. Women are being murdered because they won't cover their hair. That is insane. Yeah. That is the biggest feminist issue in the world, hands down, no question.
I know, but if you start going down the path of expelling countries whose politics we don't agree with from sports tournaments, then they'll end up being very small tournaments.
And murdering women isn't politics we don't agree
I mean, look,
with.
I've spoken on the show about what's going on in Iran. It is utterly horrific. But we're talking about the World Cup here. I agree with you, it should never have
really
been
hard,
in Qatar.
So they should be allowed to go and play. No!
Well, OK, but then what other countries do you look at expelling?
I understand that it becomes complicated because China doesn't always behave well.
No.
Russia's not got the best track record.
Well, no. China doesn't behave well. China, I'm sorry. China, look at what they're doing to the Uyghur Muslims. That would literally mean China being at no sporting tournament, full stop. And that's not going to happen. And that is a slippery slope.
We're playing America. We're playing the USA in our group as well. I mean, how many wars have they started?
They have not behaved well. I'm the first person to acknowledge that, but I'm not sure that I would say that America and Iran are in the same category.
So, Matt, that's why I think we need to take politics out of sport altogether. Although I will say, Matt, one thing that has been pleasing me is we have seen a lot of the left-wing virtue signallers completely exposed over their involvement in Qatar. David Beckham, Gary Neville, Gary Lineker, who are all prepared to go on Twitter and spout nonsense and virtue signal to their heart's content. But when it comes to earning money from a corrupt and discriminatory regime like Qatar, they say, give me the millions, sign me up.
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself, and I'm pleased that you said it, because if I said it, I would have been attacked relentlessly on social media like I have been whenever I've disagreed with Gary Lineker on something. It's quite a thing to behold, actually.
And also, they're not doing what you guys want. They're taking politics out of it. It's a weird privilege that seems to be extended to sports. We don't say take the politics out of art. We don't say take the politics out of...
But Gary Lineker wants to bring the politics into everything, apart from when he's earning big bucks from Qatar.
He's doing what you want. He's taking politics out of sport.
Well, no, he's not, actually, because if you read his interview, ridiculous, pathetic interview in the Daily Mirror, he said, I'm going to Qatar because I'm going to help the gay people in Qatar, and I want a gay footballer to come out in Qatar.
What, and get murdered?
Exactly.
The Qatari government will tell you that there are
Did he not also, in the same interview, say that there is a Premier League footballer on the verge of coming out and put incredible pressure on that player as well.
Oh, but as long as it means that Gary can earn his millions, it's fine.
This is Gary Lineker, who recently referred to himself as sort of black. Like, this man needs some media training ASAP.
Yeah, he was
what does he call himself? The darker hue
racially
or something?
abused as a kid at school because he had a suntan.
Yeah.
Now, in the latest episode of her Perma Victim podcast, Meghan Markle indirectly seemed to address her staff's bullying claims against her and tried to shake her Duchess difficult nickname. Now, the Woe Is Me Cringe Fest features the actress Issa Rae and the comedian Ziwe Fumadu and is called Upending the Angry Black Woman Myth. Now, Meghan uses the episode to defend her reputation as a diva that allegedly left royal staff in tears. Listen.
I often find myself even in walking into a room, I'm particular. I think a high tide raises all ships, right?
Yeah.
We're all going to succeed. So let's make sure it's really great because it's a shared success for everybody. I will find myself cowering and tiptoeing into a room where, I don't know if you ever do that, the thing that I find the most embarrassing. When you're saying a sentence, but the intonation goes up like it's a question.
Oh, man.
And you're like, oh my God, stop. Stop like whispering and tiptoeing around it. Just say what it is that you need. You're allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to be clear.
Yep.
It does not make you demanding. It does not make you difficult.
You sure about that, Meghan? But look, there she is again, using her podcast as a platform for privileged people, multi-millionaires in Hollywood, to moan about why they should be excused for acting badly. You can see why her former staff branded her a narcissistic sociopath. Their words. By the way, their words, not
ours.
Not ours.
Not ours.
Their words. Amanda Patel, Matt Letizia, Rebecca Reed, do stand by because coming up, my superstar panel return to crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in Uncancelled, the NHS publishes new guidance that states most children identifying as trans are simply going through a phase. It's common sense finally prevailing in the face of extremism. Leia Halpin, the social commentator, joins me to reveal all. First, a very quick look at what we've got coming up in tomorrow's show. Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Rishi Sunak gets to work as Prime Minister after a whirlwind week in Westminster. I've assembled the best commentators in the business to give their take, including Fleet Street legend and former Mail Online editor Martin Clark, and the best-selling author of We Need to Talk About Kevin, Lionel Shriver. Plus, hold tight for unfiltered analysis from columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddell and voice of the people Charlie Lawson. And as always, I'll break down the headlines of the day from Westminster and beyond with my superstar panel, former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, on the latest woke Channel 4 controversy, the lefty broadcaster is facing furious backlash after a trans comedian stripped completely naked, live on air, before playing the keyboard with their bits. On the channel's revival of Friday Night Live, singer Jordan Gray concluded an expletive-filled song about her experience as a trans woman with this eye-popping stunt. Watch.
You know the best thing about live TV is I can do stupid stuff like this.
Now, we obviously blurred the video, but Channel 4 did not. They broadcasted the unedited, unsolicited footage live into thousands of homes on Friday night, prompting scores of horrified viewers to complain to Ofcom. It comes as newly published NHS guidance says most children identifying as trans are simply going through a, quote, transient phase, advising doctors to carefully explore all underlying health problems, including mental ill health. This new, quote, watchful approach has been adopted amid concerns that the NHS was rushing children onto irreversible puberty blocker medication. Now, social commentator Leila Halpin joins me live in the studio. So, Leila, this feels like a really significant moment, doesn't it? The tide may be starting to turn on some of this, let's be honest, extremism.
Yeah, it's a really concerning situation. I, for one, don't understand why they're continuously allowing these lines of reality to be blurred. As a woman, I'm very uncomfortable with men coming into female-only spaces. Like we saw on TV, there seems to be some kind of double standard whereby people who are trans sort of get away with anything. The reality is, if a man who identifies as a man actually was on TV totally exposing himself, he would be in a lot of trouble.
I mean, what was that about? What was that about? It was just utterly bizarre, right?
Yeah, totally bizarre. I think it's some kind of weird political statement. And to be honest, I don't really understand why it matters. If you want to be trans, but I don't understand why you have to force your sexual preference or whatever it is onto other people.
Well, aren't you actually doing a disservice to your cause?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the whole LGBTQ, a lot of the L, G and the B don't really want to associate with the T, the Q and the A and the plus, because it's a total disservice. I don't, for one, understand at all why they need to keep pushing these things onto other people. If you want to be trans, be trans. Nobody really has an issue. It's the forcing of the speech. It's the forcing of having to expose yourself. A lot of people are saying, oh, it was consensual. There's nothing consensual about it. It was live TV.
And what about all of the people in the audience
Well, exactly.
as well? And the problem is, this is when you get down the path of things like the drag queen story hours. And of course, if you're a parent and you rightly or wrongly associate those two things, you are going to be concerned, aren't you, about putting your children in that sort of position?
I think we're at a really concerning point whereby the lines are being blurred. It's okay to be gay, it's okay to be a lesbian, whatever it is, but we're now going a little too far. You know, if we allow one thing, do we allow another thing? So, yeah, we say, OK, sure, we'll change our language for trans people. Well, now we're exposing trans people on TV. We then start to allow children to be exposed to drag queen story hour. You see children at gay pride events where men are really dressed in nothing other than bondage, slapping each other in inappropriate ways. Why do children need to be exposed to
Because
that?
adults can do whatever they want, can't
For sure.
they? But it's about just protecting young minds from unnecessary sexual trauma, really.
But the whole thing is slightly weird. I've heard trans activists talking about how children are inherently sexual. It's a very weird reality.
Well, and
that
also
we live
wanting
in.
to ban the word paedophile, too.
Well, that's another issue. I mean, my idea behind this whole thing is the term love is love. Sounds very nice, but actually there's a bigger agenda in the term love is love, because if love is love, well, then a 50-year-old man can just be with a 12-year-old girl. Why not? Surely if he identifies as a 12-year-old boy, then that's fine, right?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I mean, this NHS guidance seems fascinating to me because, of course, I've covered very closely on this show the absolute outrage and the disgrace of the Tavistock Clinic, which the government has now made the correct decision to shut down. There are huge numbers of people in this country who have been so badly damaged by puberty blockers and have now irreversible consequences. What I thought was so interesting about this statement from the NHS was the focus on mental health. I absolutely celebrate it, but I'm so glad it came from the NHS, because if a commentator like you or I were to say it, we would have got into huge trouble. But the reality is, I know from interviewing so many folk who are now going through the devastating process of detransitioning, it's often about an underlying mental health issue. They think transitioning will solve the problem. It doesn't, and then it's too late.
Absolutely, and there's two parts here, really. It's the fact that when I was in school, anorexia was very trendy and very fashionable. Everybody was anorexic. And I feel like this is the modern day version. Everybody's suddenly trans. And another thing which we're all forgetting is that the human experience is on a spectrum, right? When I was a kid, I was such a tomboy. I wanted to be a wrestler, believe it or not. I loved WWE. I wanted to be a footballer as well. I rejected everything feminine. I rejected the colour pink. I rejected music. All because I just really loved boy things. I'm so glad that my parents weren't forced to transition me.
Oh my goodness, I know.
You know.
Well, I feel absolutely the same, because as a gay kid, I'm absolutely terrified now that if I had lived my same experience that I did in the 1980s today, I would have had some do-gooding teacher telling my parents that they should consider raising me as a woman. Absolutely not. And this is the worry, because kids are so vulnerable to this. And, you know, thank God we actually have the NHS talking sense. Often, and I'll be criticised for saying this, often it is just a phase. You know, it can be just a phase, and you've got to get through the puberty to work out, actually, is this really how I feel, or do I actually want to live in a different way?
Absolutely. It wasn't even until I turned 21 years old that I started to actually become more girly and more feminine. Once I was a fully grown woman.
People will be surprised by that, Leia, looking at you now.
I know. Only at 21 was I there with the lip gloss and the makeup. But what really does concern me as well is the amount of the amount of state intervention that we're seeing. Not so much in the UK, but in Canada, there's a story about a father who's in a lot of trouble because he didn't want to let his child transition, and the hospital took the child away, and I think the father is now going through some kind of legal battle or something, and they're allowing the child to transition.
In America as well, this is out of control.
Right.
I'm watching a lot of American TV where they're actually putting very young children up on public platforms to lecture politicians about trans rights, and I just think, oh my goodness, what are you doing? You know, let kids be kids. Absolutely. Let them experiment. Let them see which way they want to go. But, you know, you've got to really be careful before you do anything that is irreversible. And that is the problem with the puberty blockers. They are irreversible and they are ruining lives, you know?
Absolutely. And another thing which I always like to draw attention to is the fact that there is so much political support for this. You know, politicians can't define what a woman is. And in my personal opinion...
Because they're terrified.
Well, yes, they're terrified, but also I think this agenda is coming from the top. I think I think they're trying to destabilise the family unit. You know, we've spoken about this before, feminising men, making women more masculine, and just totally destabilise the family unit, because then children grow up messed up with puberty blockers, can't really reproduce anymore. We have depopulation, easier to control. That's always my...
Well, look, all I will say is that when you have Keir Starmer unable to say whether whether a woman can have a penis, and unable to even talk about whether Eddie Izzard, who is clearly a man, should be on an all-female shortlist, you know that could be our future Prime Minister. We're in deep trouble, you know. Leia Halpern, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. Great to see you. And, of course, we contacted Channel 4 for a response to the backlash it's faced. The show was widely derided as misogynistic and defensive, but we haven't received any comment, surprisingly, from the broadcaster, probably thus spending too much time calling Conservative Party ministers the C word. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel return. Who am I going to kick off with? Amanda Patel, your greatest Britain nominee, please.
You're going to hate this. It's Keir Starmer.
What? What? Have you had a personality transplant?
Because he has said that he will not attend any event at the World Cup, and none of his front benchers will either.
OK, I can get
on
board with this.
Him.
I think we've got it. I haven't seen this yet, so let's have a listen.
Staying with football, if England got to the World Cup final in Qatar, would you go?
No, and that will be the position of the Labour Party.
Would you? You won't go to you won't go to any of the games whatsoever.
No,
none. And none of your senior colleagues.
No.
OK, I can get on board with that. Good reasoning. Matt Le Tissier, your nominee, please.
My nominee is Sir Christopher Chope, who has been championing the cause of the people who have been injured by the vaccines, which the government are ignoring, and he's taken this up in Parliament. So kudos to him.
And Rebecca Reid, your greatest Britain nominee.
Open Stadiums, who are a group who are campaigning for Iran to be removed from the World Cup for aforementioned reasons pertaining to the murder of women. Sorry, to clarify, the football team didn't murder anybody.
No, I get what you're saying.
Don't want to slander
I'm going to go with Matt Le Tissier, though. I think Christopher Chope is doing God's work at the moment for the vaccine damaged in this country, who are completely ignored by the political class, and it is a disgrace. Union Jackass time now. Amanda Patel, your nominee.
After you've all stopped weeping, mine is Liz Truss.
Oh, give the woman a break.
Mine is Liz Truss.
Today of all days. She's gone now.
Because she's so useless, she gave us the unelectable Rishi Sunak.
OK.
Who's a bit taller than I think I said before. I apologise.
Tissier, your nominee?
My nominee is Sangeeta Mishra, who was the LBC presenter who tried to shut down a person she was debating with on a radio show for using the term globalist. I think when people start policing your language, I think we're heading in a whole bad direction.
I couldn't agree more. And she's becoming a race baiter, I would say. Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Mine is Adidas, who finally, after 10 days, have cut ties with Kanye West, who, not an allegedly anti-Semitic comment, not a questionably, a blatantly unquestionably anti-Semitic comment, which is inciting hatred against Jewish people.
I think
Finally, the
Kanye
cut
spoke
sucks.
about this.
I could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas can't drop me. Now what?
So I guess he's proven them wrong.
Turns out they can.
He's proven them wrong. But look, oh my goodness, Amanda's going to be so angry because it's a double win for our superstar panel. Newcomer Matt Letizia, Sangeeta Miska at LBC, trying to ban the word globalist. What the hell? Amanda Patel, Matt Letizia, Rebecca Reed, fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headliners is up next, though. Good night.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there.